diet is so incredibly important for professional cyclists, it can't be underestimated. And it's for that reason that World Tour teams invest heavily in nutrition. They will all have at least one chef that travels with the team, plus at least one nutritionist. It's pretty clear what a chef does, but what about a nutritionist? Well, I am going to find out by pretending to be a professional cyclist again and asking Nigel Mitchell, who is nutritionist at Team EF Education First and also friend of GCN, because he wrote our book, The Plant-Based Cyclist. I don't think I've ever been so nervous going into the GCN studio before. All right, Nigel.
Ah, you say, I heard that. There's no need at all to be nervous. You should know that. You've known me a long time.
Well, that is true. That is true. But still, the scales never lie, and I think that's going to be part of this.
But it's interesting you say that, because your focus as an athlete is about weight, whereas my focus as a nutritionist is much broader than that. My focus is around your general health and performance, and weight's just a small part of it all.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because that was going to be my first question. What does a nutritionist do for a World Tour team?
Well, that's a question that a lot of people would like the answer to that. But no, being serious, it's a really quite a busy and in-depth job, and it works on a lot of different levels. Okay. So there's very much a strategic level where what we're trying to do is really develop a positive culture around food and nutrition and health and performance. And so that includes working with the chef, working with hotels, with the Soigneurs, also working with the nutrition partners with the team. And what I believe is that if you've got the right environment and the right type of culture, then the riders actually learn from that experience, and that has a big influence on then how they eat and how they behave. And part of the work I will do is I'll always do individual meetings with riders, especially at the training camps. And when we've got a new rider coming into the teams, then I'll do a one-to-one induction with them, which is usually between 1 and 2 hours. So it's quite in depth. And what I'll look to do there is really try and understand, have they got any food intolerances? Have they got any preferences? Have they got any clinical history issues that relate to nutrition, such as iron deficiencies, vitamin D, things like this? So then we may look at some of the historical bloods, what they have there, and how the diet and nutrition can affect that. Have they got any problems with any particular foods? I'll also talk to them about the philosophy within the team that we do with food. I'll talk about how fantastic the team chef is and how they need to communicate with that chef around the foods they've been providing at the races. And one of the other things I always do is looking at benchmarking where we are from a body composition point of view. Okay, so shall we crack on and have a look then at body composition? Well, interestingly, Si, what I've done, I've dug out my notes from you from 2005 when you were a mountain bike rider. Yeah. So we've got some historical data, so we can actually see how you've changed over the last 15 years. Yeah, so as well as finding out what World Tour Nutritionist does, today we're also going to find out how I've declined over the last 15 years. So what I need you to do is to strip down to your pants. Wow, it's your lucky day, isn't it? Now, as interesting as it would have been to have read the comments, were I to be sat here in my pants, I have found some gym shorts, which I think, Nigel, probably could be from 2005. I think they could be looking at the fashion. But the other thing is I hardly recognise you without your GCN hoodie. You've got a T-shirt. I have got, it's got GCN written on it as well. I suspect I need to get rid of this, don't I? Yeah, so basically, what we do here is I'm going to be taking some measurements on your body, and we're going to measure 8 sites on your body, and what we do is we just look at the total number. We don't work out a body fat equation or anything like that, even though people are often used to having that done. I don't like to use it because you have to use certain regression equations, and if you do not use the same equations, you come out with completely different figures. And it's much more objective in that if we've got just a total figure, we don't say this is good or this is bad, we say this is just where you are. Okay. And what we do over time is we can monitor that. So we can then look at, at different stages in the season where the athlete is. Sometimes we will work on targets for people who are needing to have specific weights, but it's as much around protecting the rider as what it is about meeting performance goals, because it's really easy to push the weight too far. And then if we push the weight too far, we have both health and performance issues with an individual rider.
Okay.
So, if we're going to start, I need you to take your t-shirt off and stand up, please. Woohoo! Right, so first things first, we need to weigh you. So
okay.
you can put yourself on the scales.
Wow.
72.1.
Yeah.
Now, interestingly, on the 8th of August in 2005, you were 70.9.
That's probably my biceps, I reckon, that have grown since then. I'm going to tense everything, Nigel, but I suspect that's not going to fool you.
No, in fact, I need you to relax. So what
okay.
all we're going to do here is I'm using a pair of skinfold calipers. So these are a scientifically engineered piece of equipment that's got a certain gauge on the springs that puts a certain pressure on the skin, and all we're doing there is just measuring in millimeters how much skin and underlying tissue we have there. And so the thing that's constant, the thickness of the skin really remains constant.
Okay.
It's the stuff below that changes.
Okay.
And it's the stuff below that represents the body fat. And as I was saying before, I would not use this to actually make an estimate of how much fat somebody's carrying, because it's quite imprecise to do that. But what is useful for helping us to map changes in weight of an athlete, so we can get a good idea, are we losing muscle, are we losing fat, and how we gauge that over time and helping to protect the rider. And so I'm trained to do skin folds under an organisation called ISAC, and if people are looking at getting skin folds done, then really they need to be questioning the training that people have had. Now, the way that I'm actually going to do this with you is not how it is done in the ISAC manual, and this is really just for the brevity of time.
Okay.
But the first thing what I'd do is I would have a look at you visually, and I've got a photographic memory for men's bodies.
Oh, that's useful.
So actually you don't look massively different back to 2005, to be honest with you. So just having a look at you there, I can see that you're starting to get that sort of middle-aged type of spread going off a little bit round the back, round the kidneys there. There's but nothing too dramatic. So I always
heard it here first, GCN viewers. The 18 is an interesting one, Nigel. You know, a rider like Valverde, you know, in his 40s.
Yeah.
You know, is he going to be battling, and I appreciate we can't talk about specifics, but is he going to be battling middle-age spread? Like, is it harder for older elite athletes?
I tell you what I find quite interesting, I don't necessarily think it's that much harder, because I've worked with people in the 40s, 50s, and they've been really lean. I think it's the consistency.
Right.
So I think if people have maintained themselves like Valverde has, then it may get more challenging for him each year, or he may have to adapt things each year, but he's not sort of let himself go, gain 10 kilos, and he's trying to correct that.
Right.
So he's maintained himself throughout. So I do think it can become challenging, but I think if people maintain, it's much easier than trying to refine. So what we always do is we measure the right-hand side just as that's the standard side we'd measure.
Okay.
And one of the things that's often really interesting with bike riders is that when we're doing on the side, quite often when they've crashed, they've got a lot of scar tissue. And so we have to try and measure around that scar tissue, because that actually adds quite a bit to it. Yeah. Now I'm looking at how your body's distributed, but I'm also seeing if you're a bit wonky, because if you're a bit wonky, like a lot of riders are, then I'll say, please make sure you go and see the chiro. So we work quite integrated as a team. And I'm just going to find the midpoint on your arm there, then that's where we'll take a circumference, and we'll just do those measurements through there.
Okay.
So let me just take this measure. Quick mental calculation. Okay, so we've marked your arm, so I'm just going to take the skin folds with it now. And what I do is I take 3 different measurements and basically just take a mean. So again, under the strictest protocol, I'd write each single different measurement down, but again, for time, I'm just going to take these and measure them. So what I'm doing is just pulling in the flesh off the arm, let the caliper on, just let it settle, take it off, Doing the same again. Same again. That's great. You can put your t-shirt back on to keep warm.
You can all breathe a sigh of relief here.
And then we're going to do your legs, so I just need you to sit on the chair over there. Now, 15 years ago, you didn't have such hairy legs, did you?
That's true. 3 months ago, I didn't have such hairy legs, but it's a winter thing.
It's a winter thing, is it? So all I'm doing here is just going really from the hip to the apex of the knee, and just going for that midpoint there. And so this just gives us, when we're taking the girth, if somebody's girth increases and the skin fold goes down, that's suggestive that they're gaining more muscle on the thigh. If the skin fold goes up and the leg reduces in size, that means they're gaining more fat and losing muscle,
right? Which
isn't what we want. So these type of measurements can be very supportive for the rider, because it's just helping us to understand some of the changes with them.
Yeah, I can imagine it being actually like a bit of a marker for training effectiveness.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the riders are really keen, once the way that we use this, are really keen for this data to be collected on a regular basis, so they can just monitor and just see where they are at different stages of the season. So when I've got riders who I've worked with for several years, who'll go back and say, oh, where were I last May, Nige? Oh yeah, I'm going really then. Oh yeah, I'm going really... And so they just use it as part of the matrix with it.
So might you do this at a race then?
Yeah, absolutely. So races can be a really good place to collect some of this data. But what's really important with it is that we're not making really sort of subjective sort of calls around it. Is that we're going, okay, this is where it is. We're not saying this is good, this is bad, or it's success or a failure. We're just using it as a monitoring tool. But I also find it can be quite protective to prevent riders from going really too light and too skinny. And like in a Grand Tour, we tend to measure this at the start, the middle, at the end. Yeah. Again, it's really about, that helps us to understand the energy balance. So again, the riders are ensuring we're getting enough calories in them. I have been at races where riders have been losing weight too quickly, so we've then been able to put an intervention in to help feed them more and perform better in the last weeks. Wow. So it's, you know, everything's around the support and not the judgment.
Yeah. I have a hunch that the skin folds will have gone up and the muscle mass has gone down, but I'll be quite interested. All right then, Nigel, how are we looking?
Well, what does it all mean? It's like I was saying before, I'm not saying things good or bad, it's just where we are at the moment. But interestingly, what we can do is compare this with the data that you had 15 years ago nearly. And interestingly, there's not a massive change in weight, you're only a kilo heavier, but what does that mean as far as your body's concerned? So if we just look down this, then actually the girths are not massively different. So the rim with sort of like within the error of measurement of the girths. But the thing that's really interesting is that the skin folds have gone up quite markedly. Right. So back in 2005, the whole 7 added together was 36 millimeters. Okay. And today, the 53.4 millimeters. Okay. So what does that mean?
Hopefully not that I'm 80% fatter than I was.
It's like I said, I don't do a body fat percentage, but what it does mean is that because the weight is pretty much the same, the girths are pretty much the same, but the skin folds are really quite a bit higher, then that means really that what you've done is that you've lost muscle mass and you've gained some fat mass. And when I'm looking at like the levels that you're coming in at here, then within a team, you would probably find 2 or 3 riders in December that would have similar sort of skin folds to what you have now in December. And when they're coming into the racing season, they'll be very much like yours were. So actually, if you look at the timing now, we're doing this in the winter, and we did them before in the summer. It may be that in the summer, these are back down to 36 millimeters.
Okay, so I'm just 6 months away from peak condition.
But it's not. But to be really honest, you know what we're not talking about from where these are at the moment. That this is something that's going. is a negative impact on health, or for the type of riding that you're doing, is going to have any negative impact on your riding either. So you're in a okay zone.
Okay, that's cool from a personal perspective, obviously. But what I'm really interested to think is actually that you wouldn't make a judgment on a rider when they walk in terms of like, okay, we need to sort you out right now because your skin folds are higher than all your teammates. So there's none of that kind of judgment.
No, potentially it's quite dangerous to make those type of judgments, and I really try and counsel the riders away from comparing themselves to other riders. And I don't really like to make a real judgment until we've got a series of data and we've been able to see how athletes have been progressing. For sure, if we have a rider that comes in December and they've got really high skin folds, then we will we'll say that we'll be quite honest with them and say, look, for the time of year, where does this normally sit to how you are in the season? And then they'll normally go, well, actually, yeah, I'm a couple of kilos heavier than where I should be, and okay, and let's support you with that. So when we see you back in January, this is something to work towards. So then again, it's a supportive process rather than, you're just really overweight, go away and sort yourself out.
Some of those kind of methods of getting someone to start losing a little bit of weight, I can imagine under like close supervision be incredibly effective. And after all, weight is really important for a pro cyclist. But equally, a rider will be on their own, looking after themselves for a large portion of the year. Yeah. And I can also imagine it being quite easy to not only get it wrong, but to start getting it wrong regularly. So is part of your work as well actually looking after, the nutrition from that perspective as well, like disordered eating?
Yeah, I mean, so when we look at cycling, and not just cycling, I've got experience of working with a lot of sports, and disordered eating is really quite common in the majority of sports. My approach and my thoughts really around it is actually disordered eating. So if you think about it, what we're asking athletes to do is not actually quite normal. So, if people are doing something like some fasted training, they might be going out on really quite restricted energy for a long ride. That's not quite normal. So there's a disorder to that. But that doesn't mean to say that it's pathological. And what I mean by that is it's when it's becoming, from an emotional or a physiological point of view, negative on the athlete. So when we're looking at bringing in changes within the diet and the training to help support them for performance gains, then that disordered pattern is not necessarily unhealthy. It's when the athlete is driven by emotional aims and making these disordered patterns without any real logic from a performance or a physical point of view, is then when we start to get into some danger areas, when people then start to becoming more into eating disorders. And by providing more support around the athletes, then I believe that we can prevent that disordered eating becoming an eating disorder.
Well, got to say a huge thank you to Nigel. Firstly, for going easy on me. I'm pretty sure he lied about my skin folds, but anyway, we don't need to know that. But also for his amazing insight and knowledge, as always. If you would like to watch a little bit more of Nigel, and I'm sure you would, why not check out one of the recipe videos that we filmed with him based on the Plant-Based Cyclist book. If you want to watch one, you can get through to it by clicking on the screen now. Otherwise, please give this video a big thumbs up.